The year 2003. The joint parliamentary resolution signed in the month of October that signaled our resolve to transform our education system.
A resolution was before our parliament, introduced by the then leader of the opposition, the Most Honorable Edward Seaga, which gave us the opening for seeing how to move forward with a unanimous decision of the Parliament. And from the resolution which was approved, I set up the committee chaired by Dr. Ray Davis with 13 other members, including people from the opposition, people, of course, within the educational system itself, the church, which has always played a very significant part in our education system and continues to do so, and very importantly, representatives of the students themselves. They were tasked with really looking at the system, seeing where there was a need for an overhaul, and areas pertaining to the curriculum and to the methods of the dissemination of education that would require very urgent attention.
Dr. Davis, former head of the University of Technology, UTech, is still taken aback at being asked to lead this august body. He just didn't see it coming.
Came as a great surprise, a happy surprise for me to be asked to chair the task force. I was pleased, and when we had the first meeting of the task force, 14 members, the excitement and why me type expressions permeated here. But we were all quite pleased that we were asked to take on this assignment. And the commitment was strong.
But he remembers oh so well how student representative Junior Rose, president of the Jamaica Union of Tertiary Students, would often bring them back to earth to maintain focus.
One of the hot button issues was the cost of financing education, particularly what was known as the cost sharing scheme at the time. And so there were some heated exchanges, and we listened to the students. We listened to the students and got reality checks every now and again in terms of, and it's not what you're thinking either. It was feet on the ground opinion, which brought us back to reality every now and again. We're thinking of some fancy scheme.
A vision for the way forward was arrived at through 9 months of a consultative process, which resulted in the task force report being tabled in 2004. A shared vision for education with 143 recommendations, highlighting full stakeholder participation, equitable and accessible education for all, accountability, transparency, and performance at all levels, a globally competitive workforce, a disciplined, culturally aware, and ethical Jamaican citizen.
It was well timed, it was reflective of good practice, and it was demonstrating the need for us to improve and to get a more fundamental response to education so that we could bring about some of the changes that we are gradually seeing taking place now.
It needed a radical transformation of the systems which were in operation to make sure that that laudable objective of having thinkers and imaginative people and people who are confident coming out of your primary system to make that a reality. So It's been an evolution, but I think that 2003, 2004 decisive thrust for the transformation really was very, very important.
I participated in a lot of the consultation and debate. I was actually writing articles challenging the system. From even that period, I was looking at reforming the exam system. There were discussions about whether the CSEC model was the right model, the CXC. Should we have high school diploma? How do we transform early childhood? So at that period, I saw in my own self a development of a social awareness, and myself an advocate in my own way towards the transformation of education, not knowing that eventually I would have straddled so much dimension of the education system to finally almost competing the very same agenda of reform.
One of the significant things, I think, was the interrelationships that the task force brought out between a number of issues that really contribute to education. It's not just the teacher, the ministry, but it's also the homes and the community. And I think that's what came out of it. And yes, it needed reform. It wasn't only Jamaica, it was everywhere. We had signed on to meeting some millennial development goals that required action. Hence, the recommendations in the task force report were relevant for progress in education.
It was not to be without controversy, however. Building new schools was quickly undertaken in the drive to provide accessible education for all, and $5 billion was the withdrawal made from the National Housing Trust as primary capital for this venture. Mr. Pattison calmly remains resolute about the rationale.
The physical space has been improved. It will be remembered that for that purpose, we had to secure some specific funding from the National Housing Trust. And the rationale for that was houses only become homes when the people who occupy them are sensitized, are trained with the social skills which have to be a part of the educational system in determining the kind of society we are.
He is not without support.
It was a very controversial decision, but I think it really brought to the $5 billion really allowed us to begin that process of retrofitting the schools, taking some off of shift, building some new ones, like in Steertown, where there was an exponential growth in the population because of the tourist industry. Very unplanned, some unplanned areas where you had to now start looking at how do you provide them with just basic educational facilities. So that was an initial good move.
Undoubtedly, the bipartisan support for the transformation program has remained the right move.
The Education Transformation Project is probably the best example of bipartisan, multi-sectoral cooperation for a national objective. It is rare that there is bipartisan parliamentary sponsorship of a national project. But this one had that, and it worked for the benefit of the entire country towards the mobilization of resources, but more importantly, the mobilization of national attention.
We'll be back with the story of the program's development.